You see so much advice online about building a creative business, and a lot of it sounds great on paper, but I do think that a lot of it assumes you have loads of time and loads of capacity to throw at your business every single week. And that's amazing if you do, but a lot of people don't. A lot of people are building around parenthood, a full-time job, health issues, or just a very full life. And I think sometimes when you're in that position, it can feel like everyone else is racing ahead because they've cracked some magical formula that you've missed, when actually a lot of the time they're just building in a completely different set of circumstances. And I really wanted to make this video because if I was building my creative business again now, knowing what I know, there are a few things I would do very differently, because I've learned a lot through building in very real, very full seasons of life, and some of these lessons would have saved me a lot of time, energy, and overthinking if I'd understood them earlier. For those of you that are new here, I'm Meg, and I built a following of over 57,000 subscribers on my art YouTube channel, Fizz and Flourish, where I was sharing studio vlogs, art tutorials, and draw with me videos, and that led to hundreds of paying Patreon members over the years, really popular goodie box signups, a physical shop where I've sold thousands of products, and then later thousands of digital sales after I pivoted. And more recently, I've built a software company for creative business owners to run their business, which has been a whole different season of learning and building and figuring out what really creates long-term sustainability. And I say all of this not to do some dramatic look at me intro, but because I think the most relevant part of my story is that I built all of that through some very full seasons of life. So I started my illustration business just before having my eldest, and I kept growing it during the newborn stage, and then again through the chaos of having twins, who are now 2. And that to me is the thing I care most about sharing. Not because you need to be a parent to hear this, but about building when life takes over. Now, I love seeing creatives build amazing businesses, and it makes me so happy when I see it. But sometimes when you watch people online, it can feel like they've got endless time to pour into it. And I know that for many people watching, that is just not reality. And it can sometimes feel a little bit frustrating. And if you're watching this and nodding along or shouting, "Yeah, me too," at the screen or wherever you're listening, then just know that if I can build this with a toddler and newborn twins, I promise you do not need perfect conditions to make meaningful progress. So I want this video to be the version of the conversation for the person who's trying to build something in the cracks of time. The person who has got ideas and ambition and wants more for themselves, but has a real life to factor in. Because it is possible, but you have to build it differently. So if I was building my creative business again now, with the life I actually have and the lessons I've learned the hard way, these are the things I would focus on much sooner, and the things I'd stop wasting my time on completely. The first thing I would do is spend much more time understanding what actually sells, but not so much time that I drift away from the thing that I actually care about making. And I think this is such an important balance, because I do not believe the answer is to blindly follow your passion and hope that the right people magically appear. But I also don't think the answer is to chase every trend, copy whatever's popular, and then end up building a business that doesn't even feel like yours anymore. I think the sweet spot is somewhere in the middle. It's looking at the thing you naturally love to create and the thing that feels most like you, and then asking yourself how that could be positioned, packaged, or showcased in a way that actually lines up with what people are searching for, what they're desiring or collecting or actively looking to solve. Because whatever it is you love making, I would bet there is usually a way to present it that makes more sense commercially without losing the heart of it. And I think this is where some creatives get stuck, because they hear make what you love and then they stop there, and then they wonder why people aren't buying. Or they go too far in the other direction and they start making things they don't really care about just because they think they'll sell. And then the business starts feeling forced and just totally disconnected from them. time. I've definitely learned that it's not enough just to make something you love and hope that the right people somehow understand why they need it. You have to meet your audience halfway. You have to understand what they're actually looking for, what kind of language they're using, and what would make them stop and think, oh, I need that. But that doesn't mean abandoning your style. It doesn't mean becoming generic or making soulless products just for the sake of it. It means being willing to look at your work through the lens of a buyer as well as the maker. The second thing I would learn much sooner is sales and conversion, because this is where so many creative businesses struggle, and I did too. A lot of people assume that if you can get more eyes on your work, then the sales will follow. And yes, visibility matters, but traffic and sales are not the same problem. And that was a huge lesson for me. You can have people finding you, watching you, following you, liking your posts, and then still not make the sales you expected if there isn't a clear path between this is nice and I want to buy this. And now it's not easy. I'm not saying there's this secret magical formula, but I think there is a process to learning this stuff, testing, experimenting, and looking at your data. Because all of that is what made me really start to research sales psychology and conversion much more seriously, because I realized that posting nice content and having nice products was not enough on its own. I really needed to understand what actually moved someone from casually consuming your content to feeling ready to buy from you. Because a lot of the time, visibility isn't the real problem. The real problem is that your followers don't yet know how to move from liking what they see to actually becoming a customer. And once you understand that, you start thinking much more carefully about the buyer journey, the emotional triggers behind a purchase, and the calls to action that you're using. You start to stop obsessing over how to get more views and start paying much closer attention to what happens once people actually land on your page. Do they instantly understand what you sell? Do they understand why it matters and who it's for? Do they trust you? Because it's all very well blowing up and having loads of views, but if that doesn't translate into sales, then it's just vanity metrics. The third thing I would do differently is get honest much faster about what drains me. Not every profitable thing is worth building your whole business around. And that's quite a hard truth sometimes, because when something is bringing in money, it can feel really irresponsible to question it. You think, well, it pays, so I should keep doing it. But I don't actually think that's always wise. For me, commissions are a really good example of this. I used to do commissions way back when, and I had to be really honest with myself that even though custom work can have its place, for me, it wasn't something that I wanted taking over my business long term. It takes a lot out of you creatively. It ties up a lot of your time, and it can make the business feel much more labor heavy than you might want it to be. Also, the amount of pressure I would put on myself was just crippling. And I think this is where it's really worth looking beyond whether something makes money and asking yourself what kind of life it would create if it started taking up a bigger part of your business. Now, if that thing is currently paying a lot of your bills, I'm not saying you need to cut it off overnight, but I do think there's real value in asking how you could gradually build more of the work you actually want to be known for, so that the draining thing doesn't keep taking quite so much of your energy. So the fourth thing I would do differently is hustle in much shorter, more intentional bursts. I'm really not anti-hard work, but I truly believe that you do not have to hustle yourself to success. I think sometimes these conversations get flattened into hustle is bad and rest is good, and that's just not how real businesses work. There have absolutely been seasons in my business where I have worked really, really hard. There have been launches, product builds, channel building seasons, and more recently, my software building season, which has required a lot of focused effort. But the difference now that I'm much more aware of, and I hope you can be too, is what that hard work is building towards. I'm not hustling because I think my business should permanently rely on me being switched on every second of the day. I'm hustling in shorter bursts to create things that give me more breathing room later on. And that's a really important difference. A launch season might be intense, but if it brings in new customers, content, systems, products, and assets that continue helping you afterwards, that's very different from being in a state of constant reactive hustle when you're always trying to catch up and starting from zero again. And my software is a really good example of that. Building it and launching it was not a small task. It took a lot of work, a lot of learning, and a lot of mental energy. But now I'm in a completely different phase where I'm refining it, improving it, adding features that current users really want, and showcasing it. I'm not building the thing from scratch all over again every single week. That is the kind of hustle that I believe in. It's the sort that creates a better next season, not the sort that becomes your whole operating system. And if you're curious about the software that I built, I should probably mention that I've actually got a huge rebrand coming soon. This has taken a bit of hustle, but short-term hustle. And that rebrand is why I'm not going to mention the new name, because it's not been announced yet. But I'll leave the link below if you want to take a peek, because depending on when you watch this video, you might know the new name and all the new features that are getting added soon. And if you're already a user inside of what is currently known as My Creative Hub, just know that something very exciting is on the way to you, and you will be the first to find out about it. So the fifth thing I would do differently is stop trying to be everywhere. And I know this sounds really obvious, but I genuinely think it's one of the hardest lessons to live out, because the pressure to be visible everywhere is so intense now. You feel like you should be on Instagram and YouTube and email and Pinterest and TikTok and your website and all of the things. And if you're not doing all of that, you're somehow missing out or holding yourself back. But if your time is limited, like mine is, trying to do everything can quickly mean that you stop doing anything well at all. That was definitely true for me. There were seasons where I was trying to keep up everywhere, and the result was not more growth. The result was that I became half consistent everywhere and brilliant nowhere. And that's a really frustrating place to be, because you feel busy all of the time, but it's not necessarily effective. So now I think about it very differently. I'm not nearly as focused on where else I should be, and much more focused on what is actually worth my energy. So the sixth thing I would prioritize more is channels and assets that keep working after I log off. Now, to be fair, this is something I did tap into fairly early on, and I actually think a lot of my growth came from this, but I didn't fully understand the potential of it at the time. And hindsight is 2020. So at that point, I was posting studio vlogs really consistently every week, and they did well. They got decent views. They helped people get to know me, and they built a really lovely, loyal audience around my work. But one week, I did not have time to do my usual vlog edit because I spent ages editing. So I switched things up and I made a notebook tutorial instead. And looking back now, that was a ranked video. It was something people were actively searching for. And over time, that video just kept growing and growing. So my studio vlogs were often sitting at around the 5,000 view mark, which is still great. But this video ended up reaching around 200,000 views. And I think I don't know what it's on now, and the exact same thing happened with one of my draw with me's. Again, I didn't have time for my usual vlog, so I tried something different, and that video is now at over 1 million views. And I think it slowly dawned on me that this kind of evergreen searchable content was where the bigger long-term reach was for me. And if you do it well, that can also be where the longer term sales come from too. I really wish I'd paid closer attention at the time to what was actually working. Now, I'm not saying I should have stopped doing studio vlogs, because I honestly don't think that would have been the right move. They were brilliant for building trust, connection, and a real fan base. Those were the people who wanted my products because they were invested in me and my artwork. But evergreen content does something different. It keeps finding new people long after you've posted it. It keeps working in the background, and it has the potential to keep earning, keep growing, and keep bringing new people into your world without you having to start from scratch every week. And you might be thinking, but you said earlier that views weren't the goal. But if you've done the research into the sales and conversion side, like all of these points put together, and you pair that with an evergreen video, you've got long-term visibility and long-term sales. But it's not that one type of content is good and the other is bad, it's that when your time is limited, it really helps to understand which parts of your business build trust in the moment and which parts have the ability to keep working for you later. I think if you have limited time, you really need to ask yourself what in your business can continue doing something useful once you've stopped working for the day. That could be YouTube videos, it could be your SEO, maybe a really good email sequence or a digital product or more evergreen content like Pinterest. But the point is, some things expire quickly and some things keep helping long term. And if I'm choosing where my energy goes now, I care much more about that distinction. That's one of the reasons I went all in on this new YouTube channel. Within 12 uploads, I got monetized, and none of that was because some random video exploded. It was because I've put in consistent effort into creating content that has a chance of continuing beyond the day I uploaded it. I researched it, I've learned, I've paid attention to what my audience needs, and I started to build something with intention that would keep doing a job after I posted it. And if you've got limited time, that matters so much. And the final thing I would do differently is stop copying business models that have more capacity than I actually have. This loops back to the start, but in a much more practical way, because I think a lot of people end up following advice that sounds smart, but only really works if you've got the same time, energy, and support that they do. A lot of business advice only really works if you've got the capacity to post constantly, to launch constantly, to keep everything custom and stay visible everywhere, and handle every moving part manually without burning out. That's amazing if you do have that capacity, but if you don't, it can be such a fast track to resentment and burnout. And I think if I'd understood this sooner, I would have saved myself a lot of unnecessary pressure, because I do not need a business model that looks impressive on paper if it doesn't actually fit into the life that I'm living. I need one to work in the reality of my life, and I think that's the real thread that I've hopefully shared through everything in this video. What matters most is not doing more, it's being much more intentional about what deserves your time in the first place. Because I really do believe you can build something meaningful in cracks of time, but I think you build it by being more selective, more strategic, and more honest than the internet sometimes tells you to be. And before I finish, if you enjoy these slightly deeper conversations around building a creative business that actually fits your life, then I'm sharing more over on my Substack. Last week, I shared an article about my first paid speaking gig, so I'll leave that in the description if you want to have a nosy. And if you've made it this far, I would love to know, what would you focus on more if you had one extra day to work on your creative business? Let me know in the comments. I read them all and I try my best to reply to everyone. And if you're listening on podcast, send me a DM. Let's start a conversation. Let me know that you're answering this question and we can chat in my DMs. And if you're feeling a bit stuck in your creative business, give this video a watch next. I think you'll find it really eye-opening. Just click here to watch.